I had a blissful family life. I was an only child, and my parents both worked. They were both in the government of India, and my mother would bring home volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica from her office library, and I would flip through those while she sat by me and she did her files she had brought from the office. You just pursuing these veins of knowledge through these pages without having to have an objective. And
Hmm.
that's when I realized that, I dig this stuff. I actually enjoy seeing the puzzle pieces of the information fit together in my head.
I'm Himanshu Gupta. I'm a new dad, and now I'm obsessed with one question: is excellence born or built? I interview world class performers to extract the decisions and habits behind their success. Vineet, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
For those of you who do not know Vineet Buch, he is an amazing investor. I think he has invested in how many unicorns, Vineet, through your fund?
Oh, I think we are up to about 20 unicorns now, 20 companies valued at $1 billion or more. Couple that have already exited for over $1 billion.
That's amazing. So 20 unicorns. You've been a former entrepreneur yourself.
I have both first unsuccessfully and then successfully.
That's great. We'll talk about that. And a lot of people might not know is you were also All India Rank 1 in one of the most, in fact, the most toughest exam around the world, entrance exam around the world for engineering. So we'll also talk about that. I want to start this recording or this show with asking you this basic question that we ask all our guests. When you think about this phrase, genius born or made, and you think about your life, what's your response? What do you think as far as your life is concerned? How much of your genius was born or how much of that was acquired?
I think the term genius can be overused. I think there is an aspect of human abilities that is absolutely inbuilt, that you're born with. I think one does not become a Beethoven, one does not become a mathematician like David Hilbert without having amazing off the charts 6, 7, 8 sigma capabilities. But if you define it as achieving, as setting and achieving goals that one finds meaningful, I think we can all do a lot with the abilities we have been given at birth, and really both use those abilities and learn how those abilities can be used to get someplace meaningful for both for us as well as for the world at large. So I think it doesn't really particularly matter where one starts. What matters is having a process to get from there to where you ideally want to go.
So in your case, and if you look at the goal of, imagine a 12-year-old somewhere or in India, right? Making a goal that I also want to be rank 1 in IIT JEE. Now we are not debating whether it's a goal worth making or not. You're just
Right?
saying if he or she sets up this goal, how do you assess whether so what all abilities would he or she be born with, has to be born with, versus what all can be built over a period of time?
So a goal where you're talking about a specific exam, or a period when you have to achieve very intensely in a very short time frame, a small number of examinations which take place for 3 hours each, that does require the ability to think very fast and to solve relatively well structured problems, but solve them under pressure and fast. Not everybody can do that as well. But the good news is that the skills that it takes to structure a program to prepare for something hard, those skills anybody can develop, and they're applicable to all walks of life. I have always felt that I set academic goals for myself. They all came internally from within me. Nobody pushed me. The most important thing that it taught me was how to organize myself, my thoughts, how to create structure to work towards something meaningful over long periods of time, and not just focus on the goal, but to truly be in love with and enjoy the process. I think as long as one develops the ability to love the journey, you will be happy in life.
There are a couple of interesting tidbits you mentioned there. Of course, one is, of course, you said you were born with being able to think fast under pressure, right? And the second part you said is to be able to solve complex, hard structural problems, like create a structure around like structural problems, and that is a skill that could be acquired, right? And then you said like you have to enjoy the process. Now, how would like I mean, we are all as human beings driven by outcomes, and that outcome sets up a reward process in our brains, right? Gives us dopamine. This could be like winning a video game, or even like watching a cricket match. India wins, that sets up,
Very
gives us a
true.
reward. Like, so
Very
how
true.
do we like one on how did you tune your brain into enjoying the process and not caring about the outcome as much?
So, anybody who has studied philosophy will have, in some language or the other, heard something along the lines of you can control your effort, but not the fruits of it. And the way I translate that into my life is that, let's say, and I also compete in running, so I run road races and I'm very athletic. So I like to train towards goals, whether they are the intellectual or physical. And to me, it is not about, well, what happens when I take the exam or do something or do run a race 3 months from now. It is, I have a set amount of preparation I must do today. Do I enjoy that? Did I have fun going to the track and running intervals on the track? Did I have fun studying some aspect of physics or computer science today? If I don't enjoy that, it is pretty pointless to try and and trudge through it in the hope that 6 months, a year from now, something wonderful will happen.
Hmm.
You can't really control that. You could fall sick the day that that you have your big test or that you have a race or whatever. But if you have been miserable all along the way, then you are not even going to perform under pressure at the time because everything is hanging on that one day. It's much better to say, I'm just going to enjoy the process. I'm going. I have broken down the end state into goals today. I'm climbing Everest, but right now I just have to get to base camp. Let me be happy getting to base camp today, and let me not worry about getting to the next higher camp 3 days from today. Because if I'm only focused on the summit, I'm more than likely to die on the way up.
Hmm.
I'm I should really just enjoy each step up the mountain. And you know what? People don't understand, until you get involved in trying to do something hard, you don't fully appreciate how much your mind and your body change as you do it. Because you start realizing, I was climbing Everest, and 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago, I had a hard time running a mile. Now I'm at base camp, and as I get better and better, I realize the changes that are happening in me, and I am enjoying that improvement. Whether I ultimately reach the summit or not, look how much better I got, and
Hmm.
how many micro goals I achieved on the way towards that summit.
Hmm. So I like the analogy of the Everest that you were. In my humble view, I think getting AIR rank 1 and IIT JEE is harder than climbing Everest. And that's my personal view because my brother and I have been part of the same exam. I was in the mid 500s. My brother was 42, but I know I've observed that very myself and of course with my brother. So let's take it back to this entire philosophy of enjoying the process. So let's take it back to to Vineet Buch, who is 15 years old, preparing for IIT JEE. What would that typical day look like where at the end of the day you felt like, okay, I've enjoyed the process? And so can you break it down for us?
Sure. So I was doing all of this when I was in Bhopal, and Bhopal, especially 1987, 88, 89, which is when this was happening. Bhopal was a much smaller city than the major metros in India. There was not much of a history of people from Bhopal doing well in the exam. Unlike, let's say, in Delhi or Bombay, where there were entire schools, there were high schools dedicated to preparing people for this. So I had to first actually plan my campaign. I had to first figure out what I had to study and get hold of the materials because they weren't easily available in Bhopal. And then I had to, in mostly self guided, prepare a program of study for myself. So that actually was the first big hurdle I had to overcome. And then once I had that, I really had like, okay, every day, this is what I've assigned myself. I'm going to study and review and learn today, and I had programs mapped out for weeks and months and stuff until I felt I had done all the material. And then I had to then review everything. So there was sort of a cycle of understand, absorb, and then review, understand, absorb. So every day there was a goal every day. And so I could, at the end of the day, check off whether I had done what I needed to that day. But there was that little surge of dopamine or whatever you want to call it for that one day. It did not matter. Okay, well, the exam is, a year and 3 months away. But today I had this goal and I hit that goal. And how did I feel in getting there? Did I feel it was easier or harder than I expected it to be? So there were these, so every day there was a checkbox and there was that feeling of progress made, mission accomplished, and I could go to bed feeling good. Or if I didn't accomplish, then I could, okay, well, this is what was missing, and this is what needs to be corrected, and this was too aggressive, and et cetera, and this is where I need help. And so it was every day there was a program, and every day there was a goal. And it was a very methodical approach to doing it. And I did not prepare for the exam with the goal of entering an IIT. My goal from day one was to be number one.
Hmm.
That was the goal. It was entirely focused on doing that.
Like you wanted to be number one.
I wanted to be number one. You know, in June 1987, when the results of that year, this is when I had finished 10th grade, the results of that year had come out. And I had seen all the announcements and all the big pictures of the guy, Rajesh Gopakumar, who came first that year. And I was like, that looks like a good thing to do. I want to do that 2 years from now. And then I spent those 2 years preparing for that. It
Hmm.
was absolutely a methodical approach towards a specific goal.
So I have two questions there. One is, of course, going back to your day, like how you plan your day and you set up goals and then you recalibrate your goals based on how the day went. Walk me through a memory if you still remember that, which is, would you keep on working in the day, like and in the night until you achieve that goal? Number one. And number two is like, what if you are not able to? Like, say you said like, hey, this is a specific concept in physics or mathematics. I need to learn, solve these 10 problems in Erodo or at Verma or whatever, right?
Right.
If you are not able to do that, then what would your mindset be and how would you recalibrate that?
So there's actually only in the 2 years of preparation, there was only one day in which I had to study late to achieve the goal for the day. This I was studying column 6 of the periodic table, the oxygen sulfur elements in inorganic chemistry. This was October of 1988. My uncle, my father's younger brother, who actually lived in our house, he had a stroke and he died that day. And needless to say, this was a little disruptive on many levels, but there was a column of the periodic table that had to be reviewed that day. And there were tons of people going in and out of the house, paying respects, etc. I was like, well, this has to get done. So that was the only time in my life I have studied late. I was up till 3 a.m. that night, but it had to get done. This was, it was just not negotiable. So in general, though, I was a big believer that I have to safeguard my health as well, and I cannot sacrifice my sleep or in general sleep or eating or whatever to study because this is a marathon. This is not like I have to just do this for a couple of days. This is a 2 year effort. I have to safeguard my body and my mind, which means sleep is not negotiable. That was the one day though where it was just I just had to do it.
And you still finish your goal. That's great to know, like even after like that tragedy happened in the family. So this couple of threads I'm picking up is like you saw someone achieving rank 1 and you said I want to be rank 1 too. It speaks of ambition. It also speaks of belief that you had in yourself that you can do this. How, like, can you walk me through your childhood, like, or how do you think you got that belief or that ambition? Was it from your parents, or was it like who was the biggest influence in your life?
I had I had a blissful family life. I was an only child, and my parents both worked. They were both in the government of India and both pretty high up. They were amazing people in that they did not try to impose their ambition on me. But at the same time, they showed me that doing things, that achieving things, that setting goals for yourself and then achieving them has an inherent satisfaction independent of the goal. It is very affirming. Most people never appreciate that just the mere fact of saying I will do this and then doing it has a joy all of its own. You do not need the medal, you do not need the cash prize. You just need to this belief in yourself that I can set goals and then I can achieve them. It is tremendously affirming. And that does not mean that if I say I'm going to go win a gold medal in the Olympics, I'm just going to do it. I mean, you have to have the laws of physics still apply. But but instead of feeling that I am just sort of drifting along for the ride in life, just saying, there is a lot of joy in just saying, I want to try this, I want to do this, and then working to do it and then achieving it. That sets up a virtuous cycle where you can then try and set more and more goals and do more and
Hmm.
more. And you just get intrinsic rewards from setting goals and achieving them. You do not need extrinsic prizes for that. And that cycle got set up very early in my life, not because my parents made me, but because they showed me that this was possible in their lives. And just allowing me the freedom to set my own goals and then
But how did they show you like this is how you set goals? Like maybe intentionally, unintentionally, like how did that work?
So let's take the example of the things my parents did professionally. They were in the government, and you can I don't know how familiar you are with how the government works, but you can be in the government. You can just be sort of phoning it in, and you collect the same paycheck as somebody who really wants to do a lot. And for example, my father was responsible for the redevelopment of Bhopal city and building a lot of what is the capital of Madhya Pradesh. And I could see that he was doing it because he wanted to make change happen. He wanted to provide housing for people. He wanted to have literally buildings created where people could live, where people could work. And he could have just not done anything and just been faceless bureaucrat, and he would have essentially collected the same paycheck. But no, he derived immense intrinsic satisfaction, and of course, it gave him a lot of adulation from people as well. But he was doing it because he wanted to make things happen. And
They actively used to talk about that with you, like this is what I'm doing,
our,
and
in our house, the dinner table conversation was about policy and government. My mother used to bring home her files from the office, and I would sit with her and go through the files together. So it was very much it was we were not watching TV. Well, of course there was no TV then, but we were not sitting watching TV together. We were discussing what they were doing with their day.
I see. So, do you? So is it the fact that they treated you like an adult, not as a kid,
Yes,
that played a part?
they absolutely they never thought of me as a child, and there are some things we won't discuss with you. They were never like, we are your parents to do this. They were like treating me as though I was a fully sentient human being who could make up my own mind. And if you treat somebody like that, then they will behave like that. If you treat somebody like a kid, then they will behave like a kid. I was very much a young adult at a very early age.
Well, that's a great, I would say, playbook, right, for parents as well, like how to. And I have a 7 month old baby now, and I keep telling my wife that we have to treat our baby as an adult, like as a kid, as an adult, and it speaks. In fact, your story reinforces that point. How else would they treat you like an adult?
They were so. I think a lot of the expectations parents have. So there are two ways you can have expectations from your kid. On the one hand, you can say, "We really, really want you to be a doctor." Well, then the kid is like, "Oh man, they want me to be a doctor, so I'm going to be a doctor. Like, why are they pressuring me?" So that's a very specific expectation in which you are ignoring whatever it is the person may intrinsically want. On the other hand, you can say, "Hey, we know you can do whatever you want. We are here to support you, but we know that there are no limits to what you can achieve." And that is a much broader expectation where you support the person and you do not cap their ambition. You just let them be, you let the flower bloom as wide as it can bloom, and you tell the flower, hey, there is no capacity on how big you can bloom. And that's how they were with me. They were never like, oh, you must come first or you must be an engineer. They were like, what, you do what you want, but we know you can do whatever you want. And not in those like, oh, you're my kid, so you can do whatever you want. They're like, no, we see in you that you have the drive and the ability to do whatever. And they never ever capped my dreams. There was never like, oh, as long as you have a house with 3 bedrooms, that's all we, if you have that, then you're good. It was never capped.
Yeah. And of course, every parent wants to do the best for their kids at the end of the day. But if I were to ask you, is there something that you wish you would have been more exposed to as a kid that would have, changed outcome of your life? I won't say dramatically, but for some to some extent. Like, is there any wish that you had, like, wish I was exposed to this as a kid, or wish my parents did this? What is that?
Well, I'll tell you, I have I have done well academically and I've done well professionally, but I do feel that in real life, the academics I feel is a poor preparation for real life because in academia you have you may encounter tough problems, but they are very well structured. Whereas in real life, the hard part is not finding the answer; it is finding the right question. And academia does not train you for that, especially Indian academia, especially when I was in India. I would say that I would have benefited from. I always knew that academia was not the be all. I always felt that real life was more complex and more intricate, but I did not have a full appreciation of that until I actually entered the workforce. I feel that if I had seen more of quote unquote real life at an earlier age, I think that would have been helpful. I think that would, instead of having to consciously unlearn a lot of things and then relearn new things, I think I would have learned a more nuanced perspective on life and its complexity and how one deals with people and how real achievement in life comes not just from solitary pursuit of an individual goal, but in harnessing the power of a group of people and motivating them towards a common goal, and often taking a step back yourself and letting other people take the credit and take the limelight so that the overall organization as a whole can achieve a much larger goal than any one individual can achieve. These are all things one has to learn through experience in real life. You cannot really learn this in school.
So imagine if you were mentoring a 10-year-old kid from Bhopal, just as you were, right? And this entire concept of philosophy of like preparing kids for real life and not just academic life.
Mhm.
What would you do, right, to help them prepare for, understand the nuances of real life and succeed in real life and not just academic
Mhm.
life? Like, what is that playbook or a specific activity that you would make them do?
This is harder in a country like India, but I actually think working when you are, 10 is a little early. 10, you're still essentially at home all the time. Working as a teenager, which in India is just unheard of, right? I mean, you're only working as a teenager if you have to do it to pay your bills or really to put food on the table. Working at an earlier age really exposes you to the dynamics of people and how to manage people and how to interact with people in a non-academic environment, in a non-academic, non-social professional environment. I think that would help, but also I think the more one can be exposed to an even if you are just able to observe a workforce, observe a workplace, which never really happens in India. You never go to your parents' workplace to see what's happening. I was lucky in that I could see them interacting with people professionally at home, but I wasn't hanging out with them in the office. But I think exposure to a workplace will be very helpful. Again, because how the sausage actually gets made is never something you can learn just by reading a book. You got to see it.
Yeah, so basically, more exposure to workplace, or maybe like you can work. That's even better, which is a bit of taboo in India. Where I remember, like in my family, we come from a catering family, and was considered a big taboo that I will show up in the sweet shop with my dad. That
Right,
was a
right,
big
right,
taboo
right.
there.
Yeah.
But to your point, like I want to eventually switch to this topic of you made a very interesting point and very important point. That is achieving IIT JEE rank one doesn't exactly translate into rank one in life, right? And you achieve that transition. So we talk about that, but I want to go back to a lot of students who are actually preparing for engineering exam, and they would want me to ask you this question. So what was your favorite subject, math, physics, or chemistry?
Oh, if I had to rank them, I would say math, physics, and chemistry in that order. I absolutely loved math, and there was a time actually when I considered going into pure maths as a field. Got talked out of it actually by a math professor at IIT Kanpur. So,
So what do you think? Of course, achieving rank one and being in love with maths, I would say, of course, it's not just about being in love with maths, it's also about being passionate about maths, or being 10x better than everyone else in maths. What was your story like when did you realize that you actually love maths and you are amazingly better? But would that also, so even in schools, were you like 10x better than your other classmates in maths?
yeah, I was. I mean, I was after seventh grade. I pretty much had the highest marks in every test in every course for the rest of my high school career, and it was. Well, I just learning came easy to me, but I also actually liked it.
Hmm.
I For me, I could see. So I did not have the mathematical talent of like a Ramanujan or somebody like that. I mean, for them, like numbers sing in their head. But I really enjoyed the beauty of it. I enjoyed how, how some people they take a car engine apart, they put it back together. They love how the pieces all fit together. Now, I am not handy. I don't even change the oil in my car, but how concepts fit together just really just I just loved it. It just how well, this concept from this field and that concept from that field, and then you put them together and like it just fits into this beautiful, beautiful little puzzle. And it was just so enjoyable for me. It was not a chore. It was not. It was never like, oh man, I just gotta memorize this today so I can answer it tomorrow and then in the exam and then I never have to look at it. It was like I just appreciated the beauty of it. The learning itself gave me joy.
Hmm. So when did you first realize, if you have the memory, like,
Right.
okay, this is something I find joyful, like, and the way you describe, let's say, pick an example in geometry or differential calculus, right? Or like pick any example and walk us and walk our audience through this concept of creating solving that puzzle and picking concepts from multiple fields and putting it all together.
If I had to, so a seminal memory for me is that when I was, I guess, in fourth and fifth grade, my this is my, we were living in Delhi at the time. My parents were both posted in Delhi. My mother would bring home volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica from her office library, and I would flip through those while she sat by me and she did her files she had brought from the office. And I just loved that experience of learning without a goal. Like I'm reading the encyclopedia, I'm reading about Napoleon here, and I'm reading about literally calculus over there, and it's just articles that are organized alphabetically, and you just pursuing these veins of knowledge through these pages without having to have an objective.
Hmm.
And that's when I realized that, I dig this stuff. I actually enjoy soaking in information, and I enjoy seeing the puzzle pieces of the information fit together in my head. Some of these are concepts which are purely factual, some of these are concepts that apply to generate other facts. But just putting them together in my head, I really enjoy that.
Hmm.
And that's when school shifted from being like, oh man, I gotta go to school because I gotta go to school. It shifted from being a chore to be like, oh, this is just absorption of things that I generally enjoy the concept of absorbing knowledge, and I can apply that to school and outside school.
So it's basically like you were getting a very high level knowledge from encyclopedia. I mean, like I wouldn't say high level language. It's knowledge is more about getting the
Basic
overall view,
concepts. Yeah.
the
It's an overview. It's an overview. Yeah. Yeah.
overview, and then once you go into specific subjects like mathematics or specific subject of mathematics or physics or chemistry, you can see where it fits within that overview.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just the organization of knowledge has always fascinated me. And the ability to infer from what you know to create new stuff has also fascinated me.
So, do you think that your mother or your mom bringing Encyclopedia or Britannica at home and letting you be with those played a crucial part there?
Oh yeah, it gave me the awareness that I like to learn stuff, and it freed me from feeling that learning is something that is imposed upon me by a teacher in school. It was like, no, this is something I like doing for my own sake. It is not something I have to do because somebody is telling me to do.
So, once you have grasped this concept, learn something from Encyclopedia, right? Or Britannica, or like which in those days, Britannica used to be the only
That was, yeah,
form
this
of
is
encyclopedia,
pre-Wikipedia, obviously.
was
Yeah.
pre Wikipedia. Then what would you do? Would you like talk about it with your mom or with your teachers, or like how would you know that you have learned that concept?
I would say, actually, what, this concept requires, remember, this is all organized by volumes that are alphabetical. So you might encounter something in a volume that is from AA to CD, and then the concept you want to refer to is in volume E to F, and you have then said, okay, can you get this volume tomorrow? So you have to then organize also the pursuit of this information, because it's not all in one volume. This is not Wikipedia. You can't just click on a link and get to where you need to get to. So it also actually taught me how to pursue knowledge. You can't just get it all in this one little pamphlet. Actually, figuring out how you need to learn what you want to learn is an art in itself.
How you need to? That's a very profound statement. It's an art. So, what is your playbook there now? Like, do you still follow the same playbook when you are learning about a new concept?
So, we're blessed that we have Wikipedia. I actually, honestly, I browse Wikipedia for fun every day. It is one of the best experiences one can have. But I also now we live in a world of AI where you can go ask Gemini or Chat GPT to tell you whatever you want, but you still have to apply a filter to it to understand if that information is valid enough for your purposes, and if the sources that have been consulted are actually the right ones. So what I have, I, what, I, st- what is, so I no longer have to manually dig up paper books to find stuff, but I still have to, and all of us have to understand if what the internet is giving us is actually good enough.
Hmm.
And that skill, I think we will always need, because no one oracle is ever going to give us all the answers, to some extent because the questions are somewhat fuzzy too.
Why do you say that? Why are questions fuzzy?
Well, so if you want to, for example, ask just a simple question like, what is the best way to cook piece of halibut in the air fryer? Well, I mean, you have to realize that there are different thicknesses of fish fillets, and that the fish from California are not the same as the fish from Alaska. And some people want it done more, some people want it done less. But just because the recipe tells you 425 degrees Fahrenheit for 13 minutes does not mean you blindly follow that.
Hmm.
You have to apply judgment and prior knowledge and awareness that there is not this one ideal conceptual model of a fish fillet that's used in the recipe. Real life fish and real life fish fillets vary, and you have to account for that variation in actually executing on your task.
So, I mean, I understand what you mean. Like, for example, now I've worked in climate change, and
Hmm.
whatever ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude is telling me about climate, I will apply the same lens as you were talking about,
Right,
right?
right.
But someone who's wants to learn about the new subject, like,
Mhm.
and how would they apply that lens? I mean, in your case, I think I've seen your Instagram, pictures. I think you are a big fan of cooking, healthy
Yeah,
cooking, and we can
right,
dive into that in some later episode. And so it seems like you already have some level of context and understanding about how you cook. For someone who doesn't have that, so how would they apply that lens? And more specifically, my question to you is, you said now using these AI bots to learn. What is that specific method of learning that you use from them, and especially in the context of where they say like, oh, these chatbots are making us stupid?
right, right. The part where we cannot abdicate our responsibility is trying to triangulate the answer by different means. So let's say you are trying to learn about something where you have no real prior knowledge. Let's say you're trying to learn about reverse osmosis water filtration techniques, in which I know nothing really. But so let's say you get back answers on how that works, and then you ask it, well, how much energy does that require? And then you have to be able to sort of triangulate that answer by saying, well, okay, so really, I mean, this is going to require building a nuclear power plant to give enough water for a city of 5,000 people. Well, it doesn't sound right.
Hmm.
So then how can I figure out what we need to do, or how much the actual power requirement for this amount of water? You cannot, so you have to, you can use your awareness of physical constraints in the larger world. You can use your awareness of, well, here are the available resources, and yet other people are doing it for less. So maybe there is something wrong with this answer. Just because you don't know anything about the specific topic doesn't mean you cannot use
Hmm.
other knowledge you have about the world at large to try and see if the answer feels and sounds right. And this is really the meta knowledge about how learning happens and how you encounter and validate facts. Sadly, we have lost a lot of this ability, and that explains some of the issues happening in the world right now. But we have the ability. We just have to make sure we don't shut our minds off, and we try and triangulate answers we are given by using other things we might know that are not directly related but may still apply.
I see. So it goes back to solving the puzzle method you were talking about, right? The various pieces of the puzzle. So even if there's a new puzzle that you've been, given to solve, there'll always be some piece that will connect with the puzzle that you've already solved,
Yes,
and that's how you
exactly.
make connections. We call it like a lot of first principles thinking. So that's great. So I, I want to move to another interesting point that you made, that how academic achievements don't necessarily translate into life achievement. So what happened? Like, can you tell me a story as to when you realized that wish, I could have been raised, or like I could have been exposed to a lot more of like life realities. So when that at, is there a story that you would want to share with us?
Yeah, I think so I went to undergrad in India and then I came to the US for grad school at Cornell. And it was so in India, we didn't really have a lot of practical sort of building of stuff. We wrote software I did computer science in undergrad and we wrote software for classes, but we never considered that there was a utility for the software beyond a class assignment. And I came to Cornell for grad school, and one of the professors, Ken Berman, he had a company doing distributed systems. And one of my grad school classmates was working for him, interning, I guess, but actually writing stuff that was used in real production software systems. And I was like, that was actually is shocking, but that was the first time until then that I had realized that the stuff is not just abstract squiggles on a page. This actually affect, in their case, air traffic control systems. And I'm like, wow, like, I mean, I thought that work was something
Hmm.
that happened far away in some factory, and that studying and applications of what we study were just like, I had literally not. I mean, I knew an abstract level, but concretely, I had never really made that connection. And I was like, wow, yeah, and then more importantly, I was like, it doesn't matter what grade my classmate gets in class. Like, his stuff is real, and the grades are, I mean, they're manufactured. It's some sign of like what you're doing, but the truest sign of the value of what you are creating is somebody uses it, and more importantly, even pays for it. The grade is just a very poor approximation to that.
So then, what challenges did you face? I mean, talking about your classmates who were working on a project for a live company, right? But then, did you were you given that opportunity as well, and you realize that, oh my god, I don't have that practical knowledge? So walk us through, like, when did you realize you had a
So
challenge there?
actually, my particular challenge at the time was that I was actually quite sick at the time with an autoimmune arthritic disease called ankylosing spondylitis, which causes inflammation and pain of the major joints. And basically, it's a form of inflammatory arthritis. And it was just like literally sitting in a chair and writing software was excruciatingly painful for me. It just sitting was I mean everything hurt, but sitting hurt most of all, and I was constantly fatigued and in pain, and there were no effective treatments back then. So I was like, this like writing software for a living is not going to cut it for me. I have to find something better, and that's actually when I realized that it is not just the writing of software that matters, but also the figuring out of what that software should do and how to build and motivate a team of people to build that software. That is actually just as and potentially more valuable.
Hmm.
And I can do that because that requires, I don't have to like just sit in a chair all day to do that. And so I'm like, yes, I'm just going to go into something which lets me do that. So basically, that's how I got into product management. And turns out that that worked out okay, but I just would never have been able to work at the software, like physically would not have been able to just sit in a chair all day. This would not have worked. Or stand by that. I just have to be like essentially moving a lot just to be able to get through the day. And that is not going to work with being a software developer. Now, I had to figure out how to get around that issue for myself. And I had no idea that there was such a thing as product management when I was in grad school. I had to
Hmm.
understand what the workforce was like. And then, okay, this is a job I can actually do.
There's like gold nuggets hidden in your answer there, and I want to go back, but I want to answer the elephant in the room, right? Both of us are products of IIT system, and a lot of our friends
Yep.
are product of IIT system, and I single out IIT because they are known as a temple of talent. How and I would agree with you, like a lot of what we were taught there was not exactly useful for the real world. So if you were to share, if you were to reform the IIT system for the undergrad engineering systems in India, what would the two or three things you would introduce there, or you would like slash?
Well, I think the IITs have been, well, I credit them a lot for I mean, they've been the IIT Kanpur was very instrumental in my life. I think the IITs work for two reasons. They work because they pick some of the most motivated people in a country of 1.234 billion, whatever. So you're selecting for people who are driven and motivated and generally academically gifted. So you're going to find good people. And then, of course, IITs do have a good system for teaching people the basic concepts of the engineering sciences. What is missing is the application thereof. You can, I mean, listen, we did a course in chip design, never looked, never even saw a microprocessor,
Hmm.
literally did not see a microprocessor. I do not I mean, in retrospect, it just seems insane. I mean, we're looking at schematic diagrams of back then, the 808, whatever, like something which most people never heard of. Like these are like ancient, but never even saw one. Can you imagine that? How do you learn to design a chip without physically seeing a chip? So I think the there's just that connection between abstract knowledge and the application of it to actual real world situations. That is that is so missing. Here, I mean, when I came to Cornell for grad school, there were people building actual robots in the lab.
Hmm.
There were people trying to build robotic cars for the DARPA competition. Eh, it's so far removed from my academic experience until then at the IIT. This is a joke. So and I think they've gotten much better over the years, but there is a nexus between industry and academia that happens in the U.S. especially that is sorely lacking in India, especially in the top university in the U.S. like Stanford. I mean, it is just unbelievable how much collaboration there is and two-way transfer of talent. In India, if a professor consults for a company, they're like, well, okay, we'll let you do it, but don't do too much of it because, that's not really your job. But here, it's like universities have great efforts to do tech transfer. And even in the US, if you look at the history of the US, if you look at the reason why Stanford did better than the East Coast universities in the early days of Silicon Valley is because Stanford was much more forward looking in terms of tech transfer. Fred Terman really was the guy who did it. And East Coast universities were like, well, what do you mean tech transfer? Get away from here. This is not what we do. This is our technology. Industry, go away. Well, you need that kind of a mind shift. You need this understanding that knowledge has to flow both ways, and industry has resources that academia can benefit from, and academia has horsepower that industry can benefit from.
So basically, giving more industry or like freedom to or agency to the professors.
Through collaboration, I mean, the IIT, IIT Bombay and maybe IIT Delhi, somewhat of an exception, but IIT Kanpur is like so far away from anything. Is it, when are you ever going to collaborate with anybody? You have to have both intellectually and physically. You have to have a nexus with industry.
Makes sense. I mean, we can continue to go deeper into this, and this could be a big podcast in itself, like
Yeah,
how to reform the undergrad engineering system in India. And of course, I would love to have in Gokul on that
yeah,
podcast.
absolutely. Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, of course, Vineet is an investor in climate AI, and so is Gokul, and so we are lucky to have both of them. So I want to move to this the story that you shared. Like you were diagnosed with a disease with very limited treatment options, and you said like you converted that crisis into an opportunity to move into product management, right? But that's not how normal human beings behave. Normal human beings, in fact, more so someone as ambitious as you, who makes goals like I want to be rank one, right? And have been successful in achieving that goal. And suddenly you are like dealt with this constraint, which gives you a boundary condition of what you can achieve. So walk us through the mindset What was your mindset back then, and how did you deal with that?
So so I fell sick when I was still in India in my final year in IIT, and it took a few months to get a definitive diagnosis. When I was diagnosed in Delhi, the exact words the doctor said was, "Well, you have this disease, and you can never run again. And you have to be on this pill for the rest of your life, and that's it." There was like no hope, and I mean the pill was just an anti-inflammatory that didn't really do any good. But basically, he was like, "You're screwed. Your life as you know it is over, and there is no hope." And I was like, "Well, 21 years old, like it's a little early to give up just yet." And I was all set to leave in a couple of months to the States for grad school. And I was like, "Well, you know, it really appears that there is a lot of ambiguity about my future. There is no point, however, standing still because there is no equilibrium here. It is by standing still, I am just going to remain in pain and not make any progress towards anything. So I might as well assume that I can make progress, and if something hurts too much, then I guess I won't be able to do it." So my matter was very much like I will ask for forgiveness, not permission, and I will assume that I can function normally until otherwise proven. And of course, many things hurt too much. There was a while when I was in grad school at Cornell that I was in crutches. So many things are very hard when you're on crutches. You can't exactly go very far walking. And but I was like, yeah, I can't, as though I am a patient. I cannot define myself by being a patient. To still try again. I don't know. This thing is so. There is nobody knows how this is going to go. I don't know if I can tie my shoelaces tomorrow morning, but I'll worry about that tomorrow morning. What can I do right now, to make my present and my immediate future a little bit better? Because that's really all I can focus on. I have no control, no agency over the long term. So giving up doesn't really buy me anything because then I'm just sitting here moaning about how much pain I'm in, or I can try and function. Now, I will be the first one to admit that there were many things I couldn't really do, and the disease also caused inflammation in the eyes from time to time. So then there would be times when I could only see out of one eye, and that definitely made it harder. But you know what? Like if if you have no option, you can either give up or you can try and soldier on. And there was just nothing to be gained by giving up. Giving up just meant all your focus shifted to all the pain. Like at least let me distract myself by doing something. And also, by the way, it taught me that I don't matter. I am insignificant, and I should. This is like good things happen to bad people, and vice versa. There is no point asking why me.
Hmm.
This is just what it is. Like one has to accept objective reality, and one has to try and make the best of what one can do today, knowing full well that it might completely fail. There's no guarantee that just because you try your best, you will succeed. Plenty of people, you always there's always like somebody worked really hard and they survived 80 days lost at sea on just a raft with no food and no water. Of course, all the other million people who died after 75 days without food and water adrift in the ocean, nobody hears about them because they are dead. So yes, you can try your best and still fail. But what is the alternative? You might as well try. That was literally my entire governing philosophy. There was
So was
not
this
it
the
was like
first time you achieved? I wouldn't say like it was a failure or setback, but like it was more of a setback moment. Like was someone like you would always used to achieving the goals. How did that feel like?
it was a massive wake up call. I mean, my mindset in life had been my life is about setting whatever goal I want, and then if I just work hard enough, I will achieve it. And suddenly I realized that what there is life is not Newtonian mechanics. Life is quantum.
Hmm.
There is a lot of randomness in there, and you do not know. This is not the case that if you just an object in motion in a straight line with enough velocity will just no. There's going to be random collisions from electrons here, there, and everywhere, and what parts your particle takes in the cloud chamber, like you do not know. There's a lot of randomness, and you cannot insulate yourself from the randomness. Nobody can. So it is better to learn to accept it and deal with the randomness as it happens than be overly wed to this one goal. And by the way, this applies both in a good way and a bad way. There are plenty of people set out to start companies with a certain objective. And then along the way, opportunities arise. And some people realize, oh, you know what? Forget what I'm doing right now. The other thing that just emerged, that's the way to go. And then other people are like, no, I am on this path. And it doesn't matter that there is a bigger pot of gold over there. I must pursue this path. And sometimes you're better off if you get nudged into a different path, maybe that different path is better, and you just have to be awake enough to see it. So I just accept that I have goals, I have objectives, and the universe does not care what they are. Random things will happen, and I have to learn to adjust to them. And I can do my best and still fail, but man, it feels better to have done my best and failed than not to have done my best and succeeded or not succeeded.
So you talked about doesn't matter whether you succeed or not succeed. Can you walk us through a story where, or like a failure story that you had? I mean, you were an entrepreneur. I'm sure like there must be various failure stories there. Walk us through the most like failure story that felt like, oh my God, what the hell?
Well, so the first company I started was in January 2001. So for people who don't remember the history of the tech universe, so there was an internet bubble in 99 2000, and then a bit of the steam came out of the bubble in 2000. But in 2001, things still looked decent in early 2001. Things were not booming, but they were still decent. There was still a lot of hope for like things like networking and stuff like that. So I and three other colleagues who had worked together at a startup called Choreo that had gone public in 2000. We left to start a company selling software to automate massive data centers. And raised a bunch of money and started building product and got early adopter customers on Wall Street. And then some people decided to fly some planes into some buildings in New York City, and Wall Street after 9/11 was just not interested. They had much bigger problems than buying software from startups. And so we did essentially everything wrong in that company. We had we had tremendously poor timing. We had too many founders. We had not done any planning for no typically in life you have a plan A, but it really does help to have a plan B and C. We were locked and loaded on planning, which is like we're going to sell this to those guys. And when this was no longer selling to those guys, you were like, what are you going to do? And also because we had four founders, it was very hard to make hard choices. One of the choices we could have made was we could have tried to find other customers with different versions of the software. We still had 70% of the money we had raised left in the bank. So we were not running out of money. We could have used that money to pivot to a different market. We we could have hunkered down and tried to ride out the storm, because eventually it's not like Wall Street's going to be dead forever. They will at some point come back, and at some point they will need what we're making, because they didn't like what we were building. They just were not able to buy anytime soon. We could have hunkered down and weathered the storm, but instead we were basically just like deer in headlights. We're like, we had a plan, the plan met reality, which did not appreciate our plan. Black swan event happened, bad things happened that we had no control over. We were like, we just pressed the reset button. We gave back the money we had raised, well, most of it, 70%. And then we went back to quote unquote the real world and got jobs again.
So, uh, so multiple founders, Black Swan event. So, who are these founders? Were they your friends, or like how do
They
you meet
were
those founders?
they were people I had worked with at Choreo, and they also became friends. And we remain friends to this day, and they've all done well subsequently. So nobody's life was permanently damaged by it. But for sure, that company didn't go anywhere.
So, how did
And
that prevent you from taking hard decisions?
see, the problem is if you have two founders, and by the way, I also believe you should never have fully equal founders. Somebody has to have 51-49. Like this, like 50-50 is just a bad idea. So Even if it's like 50.1 and 49.9, that's still better than 50-50. So because we were all good, smart, reasonable people who all valued our relationship, and we kind of valued our relationship more than we valued the company, I would say, in the sense
Hmm.
that we could, for example, have said, two of us will go forward and the other two, you guys don't want to take this much risk, so fine, there's the two of us will go forward. But we're like, okay, we don't all want to go forward, therefore none of us should go forward. And this happens more often than you think, by the way. People value the relation, but those are very good relationships. They're all great people who have all done very well. But we were all at different phases of our life. I mean, I was single, I had no debt, I had no mortgage, I could have survived on my savings for a long, 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 long time. Where other people had houses and mortgages and families and kids and private. So like, they had a different expense base than I did. So they had different risk tolerances. And we just felt that if, basically, I think it just was the collective, just, it's like if everyone has a casting vote, then you're always going to have a lowest common denominator decision. You're not going to take the high risk decision. High risk decision would have been to go forward. Now, who knows what might have happened? Maybe it would still have failed, but we never got to turn over the other card because we just wrapped up well before we really needed to.
So that's that's, as you said, like, this is a lot more common problem than people realize. Consensus based decision making in startups among founders. But so did you want it to go on? Like, did you want to continue,
Yeah, I was
or
like, listen, look, if the world truly ends, then it doesn't matter. But the world is not actually ending. There is I mean, I don't know how much you remember of that time, but it was truly a dismal time. You could have walked down Highway 101 in Silicon Valley at 8 a.m. and not gotten hit by a car. I mean, it was nuclear winter around here. But there was still, it was not like nobody was working. It was not like there was no economy. It was just a
hmm.
very bad time. And you kind of had to believe that at some point it would come back. And when it comes back, if you're not around, you're not going to get any benefit from it. Must be present to win, right? So I was just like, I mean, we have the wherewithal to continue. We have enough money to continue. It's not like we're running out of money. So why give up?
So then, like, let me ask you this question as a fellow founder as well, right? One challenge that we all have is, how do we work in the best interest of the company, which we want, and the best interest of our shareholders? That's the role of a founder CEO, while not being an asshole to your other founders or to your other colleagues. Like, what is that? How does that mindset shift happen? And especially, like, I mean, I can talk about myself coming from Indian culture, right? We are
Right.
taught and we are groomed to value relationships a lot more.
So, if you ever watched the Godfather movies or read the Godfather books, there is a question in there: how do you tell somebody no? And there's never a great way to tell somebody no, but postponing that no, or trying to sugarcoat that no, or trying to soft pedal that no, doesn't serve anybody. In the end, it's going to be a no. So, if, for example, you're a founding team and the three founders and one of them has to go, keeping them around as dead weight in the company does not serve them or the company. Because you know what? Other people in the company will see, okay, well, this founder is only hanging around because they're founder emeritus. They're not really doing anything, but they're still vesting in peace. They still have like 17% of the company, and I'm like working my ass off and I have like 1.5%. So how is this fair? So this is why there has to ultimately be one person with whom the buck stops. And that person has to make the hard call. Doesn't have to be cruel. You don't have to just change the locks on them,
Hmm.
but you have to sit them, you have to lay it out. They may agree, they may disagree, but in the end, someone has to be in charge and make that call. You this is why the person in charge is the person in charge, because they have the stomach and the responsibility to make that call. You cannot ever let go of that. You cannot just say, well, it's not too bad. I'll overlook it for now. I mean, it's just kind of doing okay. Nah, because it sets a tone for the company at large.
So what? How many of these learnings you actually transported to your next company? And
Oh, everything.
so how
Oh,
did you like?
everything.
So what? How did you do things differently in the next company?
So first of all, I mean, it was two founders. If you actually look at the biggest tech companies, almost all, Amazon being a notable exception, almost all have two founders. Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, Apple, two founders. Netflix, two founders. And I think that's really true. Is that dynamic of true is like you can have somewhat unequal control, but not wide disparity. And you can be agile, you can brainstorm, but you're not weighed down by group. We added a third founder later on, but we started out as two. And so two founders. We were like we have clear decision making of like, okay, Bucks, this guy is the CEO, which means he really. I was not the CEO, I was the CTO, but like this guy's CEO, he is the CEO. There's no question about like, well, you're kind of the CEO, but not
Hmm.
really. We're going to be both CEO. No, none of that nonsense. Like you're the CEO. We were very. We had multiple failure scenarios in mind at all times. Ironically, we went through another financial crisis in the course of the second company, the 2008 2009 crisis. Funnily enough, we had raised our Series C round of investment 2 weeks before Lehman Brothers crashed. So we were, and I'm not saying we predicted that crash, but we could see, and we had money already plenty in the bank before that happened. But like, economy is looking kind of sour. We have still demand to invest in us. Let us take that money while we can. So we had our coffers were full while everybody around us was crumbling. And your listeners may not remember this, but back then, Sequoia Capital, the premier venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, had this memo that they sent out to all of their portfolio companies. It got leaked on the internet, of course, which was it was a deck which was titled "R.I.P. Good Times." The good times are over. Everybody must hunker down, focus on profitability. Let's survive this massive crash that has just happened. So everybody else stopped investing. They basically tried to free. We had this big
Hmm.
competitor called ShopStyle that was funded by Sequoia Capital. Mike Murich was on the board. ShopStyle just rose. Nothing changed on their site for years. I mean, I went back and looked like 5, 6 years after that, like nothing had changed. They basically just froze. They're like, let us just survive. But you know what? There is no such thing in the tech universe as I'm just going to survive like a zombie. You're either growing or you're dying. So we're like, look, we have money. Let us keep investing. Let us keep building cool stuff. There are still users. People come use our stuff. We're growing our revenues. We're growing our usage. Let us keep building. And you know what? When Google decided in a couple of years after that they needed to buy a company that was in shopping search, we were really the only game in town that was still doing
Hmm.
cool new stuff. It was like a slam dunk.
So two takeaways from me. One is, of course, your competitor was, at least on paper or optically, a very powerful competitor funded by
Yeah,
one of the most legendary investors in Silicon Valley,
yeah.
right, on the board.
Who was
And
also on the board of Google? I mean,
wow.
yeah, Mike Mertz on the board of Google.
And they did, it seems like they didn't survive, the financial crash.
They eventually got bought for a song like 10 years later, but nothing
So do you
materially
think
good
you guys had a
happened then.
better product than them? What differentiated you there?
Absolutely we did absolutely because they just stopped building stuff.
So they stopped building stuff, but you kept on building stuff. Is that?
We kept building, not just innovating on our core product, but also launching offshoots that would benefit the core product. So we were full steam ahead. We were like, there is no point doing this unless you are doing everything you can to be as good as you can for the users you have and are getting. And if you're not growing, why even bother? You're not running a lifestyle business. It's not a restaurant where, like, okay, if I can just serve 50 diners a day, I'm breaking even, that's good enough. No, no. The internet is growing. The universe of people shopping on, we were a shopping search company. The universe of people shopping online is growing even through the recession. We must either serve them as well as we can, or we should forget about it. There is no such thing as I'll have a little piece of the pie and be content with that.
So why couldn't your competitor do that? Like, I mean, funded by Sequoia, I'm sure they also had a decent size of in funding backing available
Oh,
with
they had
them.
no lack of money. Yeah. I, honest to God, to this day, I can't figure it out. They just, I think, I think in the end, in startups, and even after 7 years, we were all still just startups with, like, less than 100 people each. I think in startups, there is there is the company momentum, and once you slow that, it is just really hard to regenerate it. Because the people who would have wanted to build cool new stuff probably left. You're not going to have, the kind of person who's content to just harvest a little tiny gold mine versus the kind of people who want to go find all kinds of new veins of gold in new mountains somewhere. They're not going to stick around. Just like, well, let me just play in this little gold field and see how little gold I can get by with. I think that mindset shift is very hard to overcome.
Yeah, exactly. And you said like great products outrun bad times all the time. Seems
Yeah,
like in your
hey,
case.
hey, Google was doing this at a much larger scale, right? I mean, back in 98, 99, 2000.
So how did that acquisition come along, right? So did you like a lot of entrepreneurs dream for acquisition by the big four or big five,
Right, right.
and you got that for your company? Like, is there anything that you did uniquely that allowed you to sort of make that happen?
We were not looking for, we were just looking to build a business. We had a viable business. I mean, we were doing about $30 million of revenue at the time. So, and we could have turned it profitable anytime we wanted just by dialing a few knobs. So we knew that we were well funded, we had revenue, and we could be break even any day we wanted. So it was, we had to like slow down some investment in new stuff, and we'd be break even. So we knew that we could build a company for the long haul. We were not approaching anybody. We were not selling ourselves. We actually heard from Google that they wanted to acquire a company in this space. And this is how much confidence we had. We heard from them, we heard this in November 2009, and we were 2 months away from launch, from being able to showcase something new we were building, a whole new redesign, new algorithms, new everything. We're like, you know what? Yeah, we will meet. Let's wait 2 months. Nobody ever does this. If somebody very big comes to you and says, we want to talk about working with us, I mean, it was like not ambiguous. It was like, we want to talk to you about possibly buying you. Nobody said, oh, yeah, okay, well, give us a couple of months. We were like, no, if we're going to do this, let's do this right, because there's nobody else they can really buy that's any good. So, like, let's wait. So we waited. We met them in January 2010 instead of November 2009. And it just went really well because we understood the deficiencies that we saw in Google's products at the time, and we were able to show how what we were doing was going to fix that. And we had prepared intensely for, not only had we prepared answers for the questions we thought they might have, we had we gave them questions that we thought they should ask us to be able to make. They were like, what? These guys know more about what we do than we know
Hmm.
about what we do. And that, in my opinion, if you are truly in the business of, if you're trying to actually be acquired, it is not enough to say, let me tell you what I do. You have to go the extra mile and say, let me tell you what you do, and let me tell you what I do will fit into what you do. And when I was at Google, lots of companies came to me looking to be acquired, and I mean, they had never done this homework. I mean, we had many
Hmm.
subsequent meetings with Google before the deal closed. And like there was one time a meeting with this person who was a very well-known researcher in machine learning and computer vision. And our technology underlying was computer vision. Well, before we met with him, we read a bunch of his papers. We're like, we gotta know this guy. We gotta know what makes him tick, and we gotta understand what he will like and not like. You don't just show up and say, "Well, this is me. I don't know who you are. Why don't you tell me who you are?" No, 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 no.
Hmm.
You have to know. You should not, in these situations, encounter a question whose answer you don't already know. In fact, you should not encounter a question that you don't already think you might be asked. Like that's what it takes to do this. It's like people just don't seem to grasp this. Like when an acquisition happens, you are slotting your company. It's like fitting a piece into a jigsaw puzzle. Well, you got to try and see what the whole puzzle looks like before you go up with your one little piece and try and fit it in. So that's your obligation as an entrepreneur to try and see what the whole puzzle looks like.
Hmm. Going back to this framework of looking at the entire puzzle,
Yeah,
and it seems like there's a lot of preparation that goes into actually selling a business or getting yourself acquired. It's not just about like, if you have a cool product, you'll be
right.
acquired for a great outcome.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, if you're building WhatsApp, you don't need to prepare anything. People are begging you to be bought, to buy you. But then if you have once you have the first billion users, sure, you don't have to prepare anything. Then people beg you to be bought. But for most businesses, it's a little
Yeah, like
less
WhatsApp is
obvious.
one in a generation, once in a generation
Exactly. Yeah.
company, right? So
Yeah.
that's important. Like, so I know, like we just have 2 3 minutes left, and I want to ask you two more questions, and I don't think we'll have a lot of time to go into your journey as an investor. But it seems like, I mean, there was a study released by a professor from Stanford GSB which said that your fund, Firebolt Ventures, was second or the third
It
best
was
in
pretty
terms
highly
of
ranked. Yeah.
highly ranked, right? I mean, it's not like a super well-known name like Sequoia or Andreessen or whatnot, but now you guys are getting much
Right.
well known. So what is it that you guys did? If you were to highlight top 2 or 3 things that allowed you to be in that league, or like to create 20 unicorns or to fund 20 unicorns?
Well, I wish I could say that we knew in advance which ones were going to be the unicorns, but I think one has to accept in this business that your ability to predict a priori is pretty low. So you have to be very willing to take chances on things which you do not yet know if it's going to be big or not, which means that you're really betting on the people and
Hmm.
to some extent on the market. We have invested in ideas which have become unicorns where we absolutely hated the idea. Like I'm like, this is a dumb idea. Let's give them some money. It's literally been like that. And so, as an early stage investor, the single most important, you don't have to be smart, you don't have to be rich, you just have to be humble. Because, man, you don't know. You just
Hmm.
don't know. It doesn't mean you invest in everything. There are many things you for sure know, and then many things for sure you don't know, and then for many things which are in the gray zone. It's the gray zone that all the money is made. It's like, it's a great team. They do this one thing well, everything else sucks. The idea, we hate the idea, whatever. They have this one thing that is exceptional. And the one thing that is exceptional makes up for all the other things that are like, I don't like this, I don't like that, whatever. Doesn't matter. The one thing is exceptional.
So did you happen to miss any success stories as well, which you regret now?
Oh yeah, I mean every investor has that. We passed on Perplexity in the early days, for example, in the very early days, for example.
Like, how did that not fit into that gray zone band for you?
It just seemed too obvious an idea to me. I'm like, what do you mean? Google would be idiots not to do this. And by
Hmm.
the way, the story on Perplexity, I mean, who knows, right? Like, so, by the way, just as an aside, I will say this: startups compete with big companies all the time. There is this popular belief in Silicon Valley that big companies are full of idiots, bureaucrats who don't work and don't do anything. This is not true. Big companies are very good at the core things that they do. The reason why big startups can succeed against big companies is finding the niches between the pillars of big companies. So Twitch, for example, succeeded because Google had video in YouTube. Google had the Play Store, which was all about video games, right, or mobile games. Well, how come Google didn't build Twitch? Well, it's because the Play Store team, which I used to run for a while, the Play Store never cared about video, and YouTube never cared about games. So Twitch fell in the silo between video and games.
Hmm.
But trying to compete with the Play Store on just games or to compete with YouTube on just video, they're not idiots over there. They're not idiots. They're very, very good at what they do. So you have to find something they're ignoring. And to me, it perplexes like this is squarely what Google does. They're going to put lots of AI into search. Like they're not I know those people. They're not morons. And by the way, it does turn out that they're not morons. Google is now riding high in the AI world, and there is AI mode in Google search. And so things are actually now kind of going the way I thought they would, but Perplexity, so who knows? But definitely Perplexity at this point is a very highly valued company, and we did not invest.
Well, we all have, as you said, like all investors have that regret story. And so we are approaching the end of time here. And I want to leave our audience with your insight regarding the first question I asked you, like, is genius born or made? And now that we have gone through this discussion, and let's say if parent of 10-year-old or 12-year-old comes to you now and asks you, like, how do I help my kid discover the genius if they are genius already,
Like,
or deepen the genius if or make the genius, how can I make them a genius? What are your top 2 or 3 tributes for them?
I would just say it does not matter if you're born a genius or not. You owe it to yourself to behave as though you are, which means that you should find something that you truly enjoy doing. And by that, I don't mean finding something that you think is easy. Find something where you enjoy putting in the effort, where every day, if you put in the effort, you get a little incremental reward, which just that reward that day is enough to make you want to do it all over again the next day. That's really all you need. Just behave as though you are one. And that will be enough to get you someplace good that you actually enjoy ending up at.
Basically, like believing that you are one. And then second is, of course, having that so mindset as well as
Yes,
the effort
yes,
is both.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Vineet. And I'm sure, like, a lot of listeners and audience will benefit from you sharing your story and sharing that very honestly, both about your successes and failures. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. My pleasure.